Hey, it's Tom. I mentioned in the previous video that I'd be going through quarter by quarter what my estimates were for Tesla in 2022. So let's get into it. If you don't want to stick around for the detail, let me just give you the summary for the full year. I think there's going to be 1.65 million cars delivered this year, $98.7 billion in revenue, $23 billion of EBITDA, resulting in a non-GAAP earnings per share of $16.85 for 2022. Now, if you do stick around, then I'm going to give you a bit more detail about how these numbers are constructed, as well as my thoughts on what the share price should be at different points this year. Just remember, this isn't financial advice, it's just what I'm doing based on my personal investments. Let me know if you prefer quick facts or the detail that backs it up in the comments below. Anyway, let's jump into the model. In Q1, I'm predicting around 340,000 car sales in total, with around 20,000 of those being the high value Model S and X. At an average selling price of $115,000 for each car, that brings in just under $2 billion of revenue. For the Model 3, which will come out of Fremont and Shanghai, I'm thinking somewhere in the region of 138,000 of those cars. They retail at about $46,000, which is $4.8 billion of revenue to add to the total. Model Y is the interesting one, and potentially one which could cause the biggest swing. Those two new factories that I've mentioned, Berlin and Austin, are set to kick off shortly, and well, they could end up shocking people with some really big numbers this year. I have Model Y in Q1 at 172,000, of which only 7,500 of those are coming from the two new factories as they're ramping. If you assume an average selling price of $52,000 for each of those Model Ys, that's $10 billion in revenue. Now, I haven't tried to manufacture these numbers to add up to $10 billion or anything, it's just a coincidence, trust me. So for cars, that adds up to $17.2 billion in revenue. And if you apply the margins to that, you're talking about $5 billion in profit and a roughly 29% overall margin from car sales. If you add in leasing, energy and services, I get to $20.1 billion of revenue, $5.4 billion of gross profit and $4.4 billion of EBITDA just in one quarter, Q1 2022. I want you to hold me to account for these numbers and call me out when something looks wrong. I'm not here trying to convince you to invest in Tesla. I'm trying to educate and document my journey to financial freedom. I want to make sure that my thought process and workings are accurate as well. I've made quite a large investment that relies on these numbers being correct and pretty close. The final number that's important is the earnings per share, EPS, which you can see here is $3.23 for Q1. Now, there is a scenario where, let's say, Austin deliveries are an additional 10,000 cars, so 15,000 instead of 5,000. That would add an additional 11 cents to the EPS for the quarter, or in layman's terms, another $7.50 to $10 to the share price, depending on the multiple you apply. So, here is a summary of what I think the deliveries of cars will be for all 4 quarters of the year to add up to that 1.65 million that I spoke about earlier. Put your thoughts around how many cars you think Tesla will deliver this year in the comments below, and let's see how close people get this time next year. One of the biggest risks I see to my forecast is the volume I have in for Cybertruck. Currently, I have around 6,000 being delivered in 2022, and the majority of those are in the final quarter of this year, Q4. But what we have been hearing recently is about delays to that and it not actually being ready until 2023 for mass production. So we have a potential conservative estimate on the new factories for Model Y, but maybe too high on the Cybertruck deliveries for the year. I'm quite happy with that personally. I think I'm probably being a bit more conservative overall than not, but who am I to judge? We'll just have to wait and find out. So the bit people have been waiting for. What do I believe the share price should be? Okay, so based on applying a 75 times multiple on the next 4 quarters financials at each of the points I'm about to go through, I can see the stock price being as follows. After the earnings call on the 26th of January and a couple of weeks that follow that, a price of around $1,260, breaking into all-time highs once again. Once we hit the half-year results and they get presented on the quarterly earnings call in late July, I see around a $1,500 share price at that point. At the end of the year, a price target of around $1,750 is more than reasonable in my eyes based on the numbers that I'm working from. Now, these numbers could be off due to macro events such as inflation or how the market views Tesla and other growth stocks, which affects the multiple that gets applied to the business and the earnings per share. I do genuinely think Tesla is actually cheap when you factor in growth. Others would disagree as they just don't consider any other stock with a PE of say 30. I do think that analysts haven't quite got their hands around the rate at which Tesla is growing, and this year, each and every quarter, they're going to have to revise up those estimates as Tesla continues to be. Model Y is the growth story this year. We're going to see some really big delivery numbers and expanding margin due to big step forwards in manufacturing and cost cutting. If you've enjoyed this video, drop it a like down below and please subscribe to the channel. But until next time, stay safe.